everybody. Welcome to Shields Live. Sorry, you just have me today. Tim had to go to a funeral this afternoon, so he won't be here this afternoon, but we will do a little bit of machine maintenance today. I also wanted to let you know that we're going to have a Christmas in July sale. I just sent out the email about that today, actually, and I think it starts the 16th. So we're going to have sale on it's in the store only. We're going to have a floor model sale on the machines. We're going to have some discounts on the second. I'm going to switch this over. Discounts on the thread stabilizer, all that kind of stuff too. So, but anyway, that went out today and it starts on Saturday. I think it's the 16th, doesn't it? So that's when, Lynn's by the pool. I bet today's a nice day by the pool, Lynn. Hi, June. Hi, Teresa. So anyway, we're gonna do a little bit of machine maintenance today. And I get this question a lot. So a lot of machines that come into the store, there's a couple of things that can be a problem. And if people have taken their machines apart, hi, Sandy. Hi, Pat. Often there is a specific way to take them apart and a specific way to put them back together. And if you get them backwards, sometimes the machine gets very mad. So that's a lot what we're going to talk about today. This is something that you should be doing on your machines. It's simple maintenance that you can be doing that will avoid you having to bring the machine to us. You know, we want you to bring it in and see you, but you do need to do some of this basic cleaning yourself. So we're just going to kind of talk a little bit about this. Now, I'm going to show you two different machines today. My first machine is my VM 5200, my embroidery machine. Most of the sewing and embroidery machines for the brothers and the baby locks are like the first one that we're going to look at. Okay, the baby lock Solaris and the brother Luminaire have a different type of needle plate. So I want to show you that one too, because you have to take it apart differently than you do most of the other machines. Sewing and embroidery onlys are like the first one we're going to look at. Okay, so they're very, very similar. Okay, so I'm going to switch over the camera here, and we're just gonna talk about this, and I'm going to go through what I normally do cleaning my machine. Changing needle. We're going to change a needle. I'm going to show you the bobbins, and we're going to talk a little bit about the bobbin. Make sure you're using the correct bobbins in your machines, and do a little cleaning. And then I'm going to show you how to take it apart, and then the order you put it back together again. So, okay, so just a second here. Let me get the camera switched over. How's everybody today? It's a really nice day out. I haven't been outside since this morning, though. All right, let me get this. Okay, so can everybody hear me okay yet? I'm going to pull this just a little closer so I can see a little bit better. Okay, so you should be seeing my machine. All right, so the first thing that I normally do, one thing that I do very regularly is I like to change my needle regularly. So just so you know, you do need to change your needle more than when you break it. Shocker, huh? You do need to change your needle about every 4 or 5 bobbins. So like when you're winding your bobbins, and you're sewing along, about every 4 or 5 bobbins, and I kind of keep a little tab. What I usually do, honestly, to keep track of how many bobbins I've used, I lay my bobbins when I've emptied them up on my machine, and when I got about 4 of them up there, I know then it's time to change my needle. Okay, so let's just change a needle. I have my favorite tools here. Here's my little cleaning brush. We're going to use that in a minute. And then my favorite tool for a screwdriver is either a quarter or a nickel. I normally have nickels for sure, but they fit well in the screw, the little screw slots on the side. So this is for the needle. So the needle is right here. And I have this question: how do I change a needle? So let's just change a needle real quickly so you can see. I'm going to reach back here with my nickel, and I'm going to unscrew the needle clamp screw. Don't unscrew it all the way, just enough so that the needle comes out. Now, the one thing you can do, now I'm usually okay with this, but if you have a little trouble with your hands and you're worried about dropping your needle down in there, I kind of use a Post-it note, and I just lay it under the foot and cover up the feed dogs like that. So if you're worried that you're going to drop your needle out of there, like when I put the needle up in here and if I dropped it down, you know, if you don't have something under there, and you can put fabric under there too, but I always have Post-it notes around. So, you know, if you drop it out, then see, it doesn't go down into the machine. It just falls down on the paper. So I usually have a Post-it note that I just stick, and, you know, it has kind of sticky back here, and then it won't go down in there. Okay, so that's your needle removal. Now there's different kinds of needles. The needles I use mostly are a couple of different brands. This happens to be an embroidery machine. So for the most part, I use embroidery needles only because I sew with them too. They're very good needles. Hi, everybody. Hi, Nancy. Hi, Marcia. Sandy's here. So this is, these are very good needles. So I've got Schmetz. This happened to be in my machine. My needle needs to be replaced, so I was going to replace it. This was in my machine box. I had some Schmetz embroidery needles, and I sew with these as well. These are 7511s, so they are a little smaller, and then the 9014s are the little bit bigger ones. Okay, so Schmetz are really good needles. The ones I use most of the time are the organ needles. So these are the organ needles in the same sizes, and these are also embroidery needles. So since I have an embroidery machine, honestly, I hardly ever put a universal needle in my machine. I use embroidery needles all the time, and I sew with them, and then I embroider with them. The eyes are just a little bit bigger, and I just think, you know, the needle threaders work really well with them, and I just put in my embroidery needles. So the difference in the embroidery and the universal, the eyes are smaller in the universals. There is a different number on the front of the package. So like these are 15 times or 15x 1ST. These are the embroidery needles. And then the universals like this are going to say 130-705. Okay. So these are also embroidery needles from Schmetz, but they actually say embroidery needle on the front. Okay. The organs are a little harder because they just have numbers. So it's the one that say 1ST at the end that are going to be your embroidery needles. Okay. So I usually put a number 11 in. So this was a Schmetz. So I'm just going to take that out. And we're going to put another needle in. So the needles, just be careful that you get them in correctly. So I don't know if you can see this. So if I hold it a little closer, maybe you can see it. Okay, there's a flat side to the needle, and then there's a rounded side. So it's going to be a little hard to see probably on the camera. Okay. The flat side needs to be, so I've got my finger on it right here. It needs to be away from you. And I'm just going to slide the needle back in there, and I'm going to push it up. And you want to push it up until it doesn't go anymore. Make sure it's all the way up, because if you don't get it all the way up, the machine will not sew correctly. So I've got it pushed all the way up, and then I'm going to take my little screwdriver and very carefully turn the screw, and then I'm just going to give it just a slight turn when it gets tight. You don't want it to over tighten it. But with the embroidery machines, often if you don't give it just a teeny little turn, but not too tight, the needles can fall out because they're not tight enough, because the machine, runs really fast and everything. And so sometimes the needles will want to fall out if you just finger tight it with your fingers. Okay. So I've got the needle back in there. I've got it all the way up. I can take my little Post-it note out from underneath there. And like I said, you can use fabric too. And at this point, before I try to thread my machine, I'm going to do something, and you need to do this every time. And actually, one thing I am going to do, since I'm on the sewing side of the machine, I'm going to go ahead and remove my foot. I often do when I'm getting ready to clean my machine, just take the foot off, whichever foot I have. And this one happens to be my embroidering foot. So I'm going to go ahead and take my same high-tech screwdriver, and I'm going to unscrew that screw on the left to take my foot off, and then I'm just going to remove this foot and get it out of my way. Okay, so let's do that first before we do anything else. And I often do that before I change the needles even, because then you can get your hand up in there a little bit easier. Okay, this machine's pretty big in the front, so it's easy to get your hands up in there, but if it's hard for you, take your foot off, and then you have a little more room to get your hand around. Okay, if you're struggling with getting your needles on. or in, I should say. Okay, so I'm going to take this off. We don't need it for a few minutes. And the one thing that I always want to do after I've changed the needle, especially if it was broken, the first thing before I'm going to try to thread the machine is I'm going to take my needle up and down button, and I'm going to go needle down, needle up. And then I know that the needle is in the upright position for the needle threader. So that is very, very important. So honestly, I do needle down, needle up before every time I thread my machine almost. It's very rare that I don't. That way I know my needle is all the way back up in the upright position. Especially if it's been broken, because sometimes that needle bar will stop just slightly down or just slightly up, and it will not be in the right position, and then you'll break your needle threader. Okay, so needle up, needle down is your friend. Okay, so before you thread, down and up, and then you know the needle is all the way in the upright position. Okay, so if anybody has any questions about that, let me know. But that is something that I can't stress enough. Needle up, needle down before you thread your machine. Okay, all right, so we've got our needle in there. Flat side is away from me, pointing to the back of the machine. It's all the way up. Now, I don't know if you can see. If I pull the camera down a little bit, if I point here, you might be able to see. You can see the top of the needle right in this area. And if you kind of lean down, you can kind of see it. And it's important that you see just the top of the needle. There's like a little stopper up there, and you should be able to just see the top of your needle right up there. And then you know it's all the way up. Okay, but you'll be able to feel it when you push it up in there. Okay, so we've changed our needle. We removed the foot. So if I wanted to put my other foot on, my regular sewing foot, and I could do that, I'm just going to leave it off. Then this foot has the little hole right here, and that goes around the screw, and then you'd put this one back on if you don't want your embroidery foot on anymore. This one's being contrary. Sometimes I need to up and down my foot. There we go. Okay, so then I put this one back on. All right, so we're just going to leave it off right now, because I often, when I'm getting ready to clean underneath here, I like this off out of my way so that I can see what I'm doing. So I just take that off first, and then often I even take the needle out. So you can do that as well and leave the needle out if you're worried that you're going to poke yourself. I normally do pretty well with the needle in. I just usually leave it, but I often do take the foot off. So either way, it works fine. Okay. So we also want to clean out down here underneath. Okay. And this is important to do this every now and then, because you do get quite a lot of lint under here. Okay. And this is the same type of needle plate arrangement for almost all of the machines, with the exception of the Solaris and the Luminaire. And then there's a couple of different ones, like the PQ has a different arrangement. But this one is what most of the brother and baby lock machines have. So there's a 2-piece needle plate. There's a metal part and a plastic part. Okay. So this is going to be the way we're going to take it apart. We're going to take the little bobbin door off, and then we're going to take our bobbin out. So I'll lay my bobbin up at the top here. Okay. Then this plastic L-shaped area comes off. So what I do is I take my finger, and there's a little ledge right along the front here, and I just pull back, and it pops right off. Okay. So you can remove the bobbin case is going to be next. You have to take this off first. Okay. It pops on the same way. You just push it back on like this, but I'm just going to pop it off. I'm going to pull back, okay, like that, and remove it. Then I'm going to reach in here to my bobbin case, and I'm just going to grab it with my thumb and my first finger and just pull it out. Okay, and I was embroidering, so I have my tighter bobbin case. We talked about that a few weeks ago. So I have my tighter bobbin case in here. Okay. So then I'm going to lay that over to the side. And then the next thing I want to remove is my needle plate screws. So I'm going to get my high-tech screwdriver again. And this works really great for needle plate screws. Just be careful that you don't toss it down into the machine. I've done that before. So I'm just going to unscrew these needle plate screws. very carefully. And what I normally do with my needle plate screws is I set them inside my bobbin case, so then they don't roll around. So we're just going to remove this. Now your machine will probably complain to you that there's no needle plate on because if you have it turned on, and technically they say you're supposed to turn it off, but I never do. Okay, so then I'm going to remove the needle plate, okay, the metal needle plate, and I'm just going to set it over here. All right, so that's the way you take it apart. Bobbin door, okay, then the gray plastic thing, okay, and then the bobbin case is going to come out, then the screws for the metal needle plate, and then the metal needle plate. Okay, and that's the way you're going to take it off, take it apart. So now I'm going to look inside here, and this is something that I do pretty regular because I sew a lot, and I'm not a huge proponent of canned air, so I usually use my little brush, and everybody got one of these with their machines. I love the little brush. The one thing I do want to stress, and Tim said, make sure you tell people not to get too vigorous, because there's a piece of felt like back here around this middle area, especially if you have a cutter on your machine, and that is part of the cutting mechanism, and so that needs to be there. So just tell them not to get too vigorous around the felt. But I can see that I've got quite a little bit of gunk in my machine. Can you see that little wad of gunk there that I just got a hold of? You see that? That was right around my cutter. I'm going to put my glasses on real quick here just a second so I can see. But there is quite a little bit of fluff around that little felt area, and I'm just going to gently clean around that, because if that gets clogged up, and then my cutter is kind of back here, and some of the cutters are kind of over on the side-ish. So I'm just going to brush around my cutter to see that there's no threads stuck in there. And then I'm going to take my little brush down inside my bobbin case here, the hook area, metal area, and get some of the lint. You can see I didn't clean my machine for this because I figured, this would give everybody a chance to see my dirty machine. I did a couple projects on it a couple weeks ago and haven't cleaned it since. Okay, so we're just going to get some of this gunk out of here. And like I said, just be careful around that felt. And then the other place that I get quite a little bit of lint and stuff is up in my feed dogs, because you can actually get the stuff so packed in your feed dogs right here that you'll get great big wads of like felt out of there. And then you wonder why your feed dogs are not feeding. Your machine's not, pulling the fabric through. And it's because these won't go up because they're so packed full. They're hitting these little bars right here, and they won't go up and down like they should. Okay, so that's another place I like to really clean. Okay, especially down in the hook area here. We're going to make sure, and because there's a little sensor down there also that makes your bobbin sensor turn on and off. Okay, that looks better. Mine wasn't too dirty. I clean mine pretty regular. I do this, because I sew a lot. So, I probably do this at least once a week. And so I use a lot of batting. So batting's very linty. So also use good quality threads because they're less linty. And you don't get this buildup in your machine. That looks pretty good. Okay. So that's kind of my basic maintenance. I mean, that's something simple that everybody can do to keep their machine running better. Keep your needles changed regularly. Needles are not very expensive, so change your needles regularly. Your machine will just sew better. And clean the inside of the machine and keep the fluff out of there. Okay? So that's kind of I didn't want this to be too high tech. This is something I do all the time, but this is what most people have the trouble with, is they get in here and they get it all cleaned out, but then when they go to put it back together, they put it back together backwards. Okay, so this has always been a problem for everybody, and we've all done it, so don't feel bad, because all of us have done it, including me. Okay, the other thing I like to do is I'm going to take the little screws out of here for a minute, and I like to take my little brush and brush out my bobbin case. Sometimes if I think there's something down in here, the little tension is right down in here, and you can kind of take a piece of paper or like a dollar bill, and you can kind of run the corner down in here, and it'll take, if there's any fluff down in there, it'll take that out or push it through. So that's the other thing you can do, is just clean your bobbin case out, make sure it looks good and clean in there. So this is something simple. I'm a very basic, I don't go much further than this, honestly, with cleaning, but I like to keep my machine clean so that it runs better. Okay, so the next step then is to re-put it back together, and this is very important. So what people have a tendency to do is they have a tendency to drop this bobbin case in right now. Well, there's a problem. That's not the way we took it apart, is it? We took this off, this metal plate over here, off after this was removed. So it needs to go back in reverse order. So what's very, very important is we're going to leave this bobbin case out until we get this metal needle plate back on. Okay, so this needs to go back on the machine first. That's very, very important. So if you remember nothing else from this, remember this goes on and everything else is out of here. Okay, so we're going to put the metal needle plate back on. And this is where you got to be real careful not to throw the screws down into the machine, because you know Jan's done that before. So we're going to put the little screws back in. And like I said, if you're worried that you're going to poke yourself with your needle, just take the needle out while you're working down here. I often just leave it on, but it just depends on how comfortable you are with it being there. Okay, and then I'm going to tighten those down a little bit with my fingers, and I'm going to take my high-tech tool, my nickel, and I'm going to tighten these down. I know there's a couple of actual needle plate screws and or screwdrivers, and you know this is still the easiest one to hang on to. Sometimes I use a quarter. So if you have a little trouble hanging on to littler things, use the quarter because it works well too, and it's just a little bit bigger. Okay, so either one. I usually have nickels for some reason, but okay, so we got our needle plate. And then the other thing about these needle plates, they do need to be tight. I know it would be nice. It's like, oh, well, those screws are so tight. It'd be nice to be able to get it off easier. Well, if they're loose, they actually vibrate up and down and make the most horrible clacking noise. So if you hear a clacking noise with your machine, it's like, what's going on? It's probably your needle plate's loose. And tighten it down and it'll be okay. So that does need to be tight, okay? So it won't move. So I've got that on. So now the next step, remember then, is going to be the bobbin case. So now we put the bobbin case in, okay? So I'm going to go this way a little bit. And I don't know if you can see, there's a little white dot right here, okay? And on the bobbin case, there's a little white dot. And some of them have kind of like a little arrow. This was sort of a dot. And then there's a little thing that sticks out in the hook area right here. And there's a little divot right here. Okay, those line up. So we need to line up the dots and line up that little divot with this little thing that's sticking out. So I'm going to put the fuzzy thing goes under the needle plate. So I'm just going to tip it down and see it goes in there so easy. Just lay it down in there, get it all lined up, and then drop it down. And it's going to just barely move. It's going to move just a little bit when you get it in there, and it's nice. Make sure it's nice and flat, like that. Okay, so that is in there correctly. So I can take it out, see how easy it comes out, and then just tip it in, line up the little dots and the little divot here, and lay it down, and it should be nice and flat in there, and just barely wiggle back and forth. Okay, and that is correctly inserted then. And then we're going to put on the gray thing. Now this has like little clippies on it, here, and there's one back here, okay? So you have to kind of lay it on, and then you can kind of feel that where the little clips are. They're right here, and then there's one back here. And then once you kind of get them lined up, just push in, and it'll click right on. like that. Okay. The machine, when it's off, I don't know if you could see it over here. I don't know if you saw it before, but when I pull this off, it tells me there's no needle plate cover. Okay. So when I get it back on correctly, that error message goes away. Okay. So we got it back on there. It's nice and snug. My needle plate's nice and snug. It's not going to clack. All right. And then we're going to put our bobbin back in. So this is my embroidery bobbin because that's the case I have in here. Put my bobbin back in. And remember, I'm just going to do, this is a good basic class. So we're going to talk about bobbin insertion just in case. You're going to make the letter P with your bobbin. Okay. So you're going to hold the thread's going to come off the left. You're going to hold it up in front of you. It's going to look like the letter P. I'm going to drop this down into the bobbin case. And then on the bobbin case, and you might not be able to see too well, there's a little arrow and then a little trough. And almost all the machines are like this. I'm going to pull it down underneath there and around and cut it off. You do not have to pull your bobbin thread up because it'll pick up, and this is holding the thread for you over here. Okay. Then we're going to put our bobbin door back on. Okay. So that is properly put back together. So it is very important that you do this in the reverse order that you take it apart. So when we take it apart, remember we did the door and the bobbin, and then we pulled off the front of the needle plate. Just going to do it again. Then we reached in and grabbed the bobbin case and pulled it out. And then I removed the screws for the needle plate and the needle plate. Okay. Then when I put it back together, we put the needle plate on and the needle plate screws and tightened them down so that they were nice and snug. Then we're going to put the bobbin case back in, lining up the little white dots here. Tip it in, put it down. Should just barely wiggle. Then we're going to put the gray plastic piece on and push it on. Then we can put our bobbin back in like that, and the bobbin door. Okay. So does anybody have questions about how to take this apart and put it back together? This has always been a huge thing for people because if you get it back together the wrong way, the machine does not like it. What happens is if you put this metal needle plate down on top of that bobbin case, it kind of pinches it and then it won't rotate correctly. And it kind of pinches it in there and it doesn't move. Okay. So it's very important that this metal plate is always on your machine before you drop the bobbin case in. Okay. All right. So that's a big thing. And the other trick that I love though is my little Post-it note. Put your Post-it note underneath or over your feed dogs if you're worried you're going to drop this needle down in there. June is asking, is there anything different I need to do if I use spray adhesive or sticky back? I would tell you, do not use spray adhesive. That's my first advice to you. I do not like that stuff. It gets down in your machine. And the only way you can get it clean is if our technician takes it apart and like completely cleans it inside. Sticky back stabilizer, if you use good sticky back stabilizer, like the Dime or the Floriani, you will not have a lot of residue with that. It's made for sewing machines, but I do not like spray adhesive. I'm not a good person to talk to you about that. I've never used it. I used it one time and it was everywhere, even on my cat. And I only spritzed it like 2 little times in a box and it was everywhere in my house. I will never use it again. I use fabric glue stick that's made for fabric. So, okay. So that's my answer to that little question. So no, there's really not a lot because you won't be able to get that sticky stuff out of there. It sometimes needs to be scraped out and I would not tell you to do that yourself. If it's really gummy, you need to bring it to a technician and he'll have to completely tear the whole machine apart to do that. So, okay. All right. So my little sticky note though works good for if you're worried about dropping your needles or just put a piece of fabric underneath, whichever works for you. Okay. Let's talk about bobbins here for a minute. This is the other thing that a lot of people have problems with. Bobbins are a huge thing, and you want to use a class 15 flat bobbin. And some of the ones that say they're class 15s have a little ledge on the top. Do not use those. Okay. These are we carry these on our website. We carry these on shieldsewingcenter.com. We carry these in the store. They're very inexpensive. They're 40 cents a piece, and this is a class 15 bobbin. Just come and buy them from us, then you know your bobbins are good. We buy a good bobbin, and bobbins make a huge difference. If you have the wrong bobbin in your machine, you will have all kinds of problems. Cheryl, if you drop a needle, if you break a needle, so often where my needle goes, and I'll just show you, she asked, where to look for the needle if it breaks. So often what happens is the needle will go down underneath the bobbin case here in this hook area. And sometimes the tip is down there. If it's not in there and you take this off too and look and don't see it, it's probably all the way at the bottom of the machine. And normally down there, there's not a problem. It's very rare that I've actually had a problem. I did have a problem once that I broke a needle, or I dropped a needle, actually, the top part of my needle down into the machine, and it got down in one of the gears down underneath, and it actually stopped the machine. So I did have a problem one time, but it's so rare. But I often have like a tip of the needle, and it often goes into this bobbin area, like the hook area down here, the metal part. So that's what I usually look for them, is under my bobbin case. And probably 99% of the time I find them there. So, okay. All right. Or at least 90% anyway. All right, so we'll put our bobbin back in here. Now, this is my embroidery bobbin case, because we talked about that before. That's the one with the tight one. So I've got a pre-wound embroidery bobbin in there. And I am going to go ahead and put my embroidery foot back on. So we'll do that. I'm going to slip this embroidery foot back in here. So bobbins, class 15. But make sure that you buy, I would just tell you, and honestly, the bobbins are almost cheaper here than they are. Like if you buy actual Brother, the other Brother brand bobbins, they're more expensive. So just buy bobbins here. We have tons of bobbins. We buy them by the hundreds. And I always have them, and they're 40 cents a piece. And so you can have lots of bobbins, and these work really well in the machine. Okay. So that's very important. Bobbins are important. All right. So I got my foot back on here. And make sure they're nice and flat. I'm going to just finger tight it, and then I'm going to take my little screwdriver and I'm going to tighten it. Okay. You want to make sure your foot's tight too, because if your foot's not tight, it clacks and makes a terrible noise. And then you can really break needles, because if it moves a little bit, you can come down and hit it and it'll break a needle. And then this one has the little tail. So on this one, I have to reach up, and there's a little plug in the back of my machine that I'm going to plug it into. Okay, because it's my embroidery foot. Okay, so now I'm ready to embroider. I've cleaned my machine. I've replaced the needle, and I've got my foot back on. So how does everybody feel about that? You think you can do that? Think that's easy enough? You know what kind of bobbins? Class 15 bobbins. And like I said, they're up on our website, shieldsewingcenter.com, and they're in the store. So please just get your bobbins. They're going to be good. And I usually recommend either Schmetz or organ needles. I use primarily organ needles, and these are embroidery needles because this is an embroidery machine. I don't normally buy both universals and embroidery needles. I like the embroidery needles, and I just sew with those. Okay, so that's my needles. Okay, so now the other thing I wanted to show you, this machine. Oh, and then let's do a threading just to recap. What are we going to do before we try to thread the machine? I'm going to just start the threading up here of my machine, just following the numbers. Okay, like that. And what are we going to do before we try to thread it? I got a hold of the thread right here. We are going to use the needle up and down button, which is right here. I'm going to go needle down. Oops, second here. I'm going to take this foot off because I've got my embroidery foot on and it thinks it's sewing. Just a second, let me just hit this. Let me hit the embroidery button. Then it'll be okay. It'll be happier then. I just wanted to get the embroidery unit out of the way. So needle up and down. Very good, Sandy. So I've got my foot, I've got my thread right here, and it's through number 6, which is the little guide above the needle. And it does have to be in there for the needle threader to work, just so you know. I'm going to go needle down, needle up. Okay. Then I'm going to go across to number 7, cut it off on the cutter number 8. And then my machine actually has a button. So some of them have the little thing you push down over here, and mine has a button over here. So I'm just going to hit this button and it's going to thread the machine. Okay. But it's important, needle up and down. If you learn nothing else today, remember this goes on first and needle up and down before you thread your machine. And I do it almost every time. Okay. So this is most of the machines. This is the organization that is most of the sewing machines. The other machine is slightly different. So I'm going to switch the camera over here. If you give me a minute, I'm going to move this camera over. And I'm going to show you the Luminaire because this one's just a little different. It's the same kind of concept, but this one's going to be a little different because it has a one-piece needle plate. The one-piece needle plate is really cool because it's very handy, but you don't have needle plate screws. Okay. And I really like that. It was one of the things that I was like really excited about when I got my Luminaire, that I didn't have to drop needle plate screws down in the machine anymore. But I still have a machine that has needle plate screws. So, all right, just a second. I got to get my little camera thing a little bigger for this table. Okay. All right, so we're going to look at this one. So this one's just slightly different. Same concept, but we are going to have to take it apart and put it back together just slightly differently. Okay. So let me get my little tools here. All right. All right. So again, I've got my embroidery foot on here. Just a second. I'm going to go ahead and take this off. So I'll take my high-tech needle or my high-tech screwdriver here. I'm going to take this foot off just to get it out of my way for a minute. Okay. Now this machine is a Luminaire, and the Solaris is going to be the same way, but this one's really cool. It's got this one-piece needle plate. The older machines also had a one-piece needle plate, so they brought it back with this machine. So this little thing right here makes your needle plate come off. So you just pull this back, and the whole needle plate pops up. Okay, I didn't even take the door off because the whole thing comes off. Okay, so I'm just going to lay this over here. And I'm going to now, at this point, I'm going to take out my bobbin and my bobbin case. So here's my bobbin case. Okay. So this is kind of the opposite of the other ones, isn't it? Okay. And then I would do the same thing here. I have my cutter mechanism in this vicinity. I have my little fuzzy thing over here. And then this one's very clean because it's new. And then I would clean out this area, clean out my feed dogs, make sure there's no lint. Around this area, I get it all cleaned out. Okay. And then when I go put this one together, I have to do it the opposite way. This one, for those of you with this machine, you have to put your bobbin case in first. So that is unusual. Now this one's a little trickier. There's still a little dot here and the little arrow dot here. But there's this little thing right here. It gets kind of in the way a little bit. So you have to kind of tip it and twist it just a little bit to get it to go in there. But again, the same thing. You want it to lay down in there. You can see how I kind of twisted it over. I'm going to lay it in there and down. And then it should just barely wiggle. Okay. So this is sticking out on this one. It's a little bit harder. So you just have to kind of twist it a little bit to get it in there. There we go. Like that. Okay. And that's in there the way I want it. And then I'm just going to take my door off of the needle plate here. And then when I go to put this in, there's 2 little tabs on the end. I'm going to slide those back in there. And I'm going to push that down until it clicks. And it's completely engaged. So this one, whoops, a second here, I just lost my camera. This table is not a very good table for the camera because it doesn't have a very big lip on it. So just a second. I just had to bring another table over because I had 2 machines today instead of just one. Get it a little bit tighter here. All right. So over here, if you see, and I don't know if I can show it to you. I'm just going to take the camera off for a second. I'll show it to you over here. I'll just hold the camera. If I take this off, the needle plate, see, it gives me that same little sad face. Turn off the machine before attaching or removing the needle plate. I don't normally turn off my machine when I do this cleaning, but you can certainly do that if you're worried about hitting a button or something. Okay. When I push it down, the little sad face goes away. Okay. So now let's see if I can get the camera to stay. These are those little classroom tables, the little skinny ones, and they don't work as well with the camera. So I have a better one for the camera. All right, so let's go ahead and put our foot back on. Now this one doesn't have the little tail that I have to plug back in, because this one is the one that has the projector in it. So I'm going to go ahead and put this back on. I've got this loosened up back here, and I'm going to slide it around where the little notch is. Okay. Tighten this back up. And because you don't want it to be crooked and you don't want it to be loose. Okay, and then we'll put our bobbin back in. This one's the same way for the bobbin, and then put our door back on. Okay, so you can see this one's a little bit faster to get the needle plate, on and off, because you don't have to take the screws out. So this is the first machine. For a long time, the old machines used to have a one-piece nail plate years ago. If you have an older machine, it may still have one of those. And then you took the whole needle plate off. And so it was hard to adjust to those newer needle plates that are 2-piece like that, because even we had problems because we were used to these 1-piece ones. So it was hard for us to adjust too, because we were used to putting them together a certain way, and this one has to be done differently. So like that. Okay. All right. So is everybody comfortable with how to take your machine apart, clean it out, and put it back together again in the order you need to do that? You can go back and watch this video. It'll be up on Facebook, and I'll also put it up on YouTube. So then Sew Along with Jan. So then you'll be able to watch it again if you need it. Okay. Any other questions about that? So that's kind of my basic maintenance. We talked a little bit about needles, talked about the bobbins, put the bobbin in, needle up and down to thread your bobbin, or to thread your needle, how to take your machine apart and put it back together, clean it out. Okay. So give me a second, and I will put the camera back up. See if I can find the right one here. All right. So we have had our basic maintenance class. I hope this helped everybody, because this is something that, it may avoid, a trip to see Ron or Tim or Jan with your machine. If you and the important thing is putting it back together correctly, because if you put it back together backwards, then that's when you have some problems, because the machines don't like it if they're put back together incorrectly. So, okay. So I haven't decided what we're going to do next week. If you have any suggestions, please comment and let me know if there's something that you would like me to do. I haven't thought about it yet. I was worried about this one first, so we'll think about next week. But you let me know if there's something that you're interested in seeing, and put it in the comments. And please comment, share, and like our Facebook page and our in the videos and stuff. Helps us on Facebook. And don't forget that we're having our Christmas in July sale starting, I think it's Saturday. Isn't that the 16th? I don't have my calendar in front of me here. Actually, I do. I guess I have my phone. Let me look. I think it's Saturday, I think. And I think it runs through the 22nd. Let's see. Saturday's the 16th, and the 22nd is Friday. Okay. So from this coming Saturday through next Friday, in both stores, in store only. There's no online sales, and in-store only, and all bunches of stuff are going to be on sale. We'll send another email out in a few days that tells you some more specifics, but we wanted to let everybody know about it. So, okay. So I'm glad that you joined me. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. And if you have any questions about some basic maintenance on your machine, let us know. And I will be seeing you next week at 2:00. Thank you. Have a good day, everybody.